Why stability was designed to be boring. Nothing dramatic announced its arrival. No crisis demanded it. No revolution forced it into existence. Stability was engineered quietly, deliberately, and with one surprising goal in mind: to be uninteresting enough that no one would interfere with it. To understand why stability was designed to be boring, we must return to a Europe exhausted by extremes. Booms enriched a few and terrified many. Crashes erased savings overnight. Every surge was followed by panic. Every innovation by fear of collapse. Policymakers learned a hard lesson. Excitement in finance was not progress. It was danger. The first reveal begins with a shift in philosophy. Instead of chasing growth through spectacle, institutions focus on predictability. Rules were written to dampen swings rather than amplify them. Returns were capped. Risks were spread thin. Systems were optimized not for maximum gain, but for minimum surprise. Stability was no longer an outcome. It was a design principle. The second beat followed as these designs spread. Financial products became dull by intention. Reporting standards grew repetitive. Processes multiplied. Complexity increased, not to impress, but to slow things down. If no single action could move the system dramatically, no single failure could destroy it either. Boredom became protection. What made this powerful was psychological. Markets react to drama. Investors chase momentum. Politicians exploit urgency. By removing spectacle, stability removed temptation. Decisions became technical, incremental, and forgettable. And because they were forgettable, they endured. Over time, people stopped noticing stability altogether. That was the point. A system that demanded attention, invited interference. A system that faded into the background could keep working. Stability had not emerged naturally. It had been designed, carefully, intentionally, and to be ignored. As the design took hold, boredom became policy rather than byproduct. Decision-making slowed on purpose. Layers of review were added not to improve creativity, but to reduce impulse. Every proposal passed through committees trained to ask the same questions repeatedly. Not is this exciting, but is this predictable? Not can this grow fast, but can this fail quietly? The reveal deepened as incentives were reshaped. Careers advanced through caution, not boldness. Institutions rewarded those who avoided mistakes rather than those who pursued breakthroughs. Over time, ambition adapted. Innovation did not disappear, but it learned to speak softly. Anything that drew attention risked scrutiny. Anything that caused surprise risked rejection. The conflict emerged when boredom began colliding with reality. Crises did not arrive politely. Shocks ignored procedure. Yet systems designed for calm struggled to react at speed. Emergency responses felt clumsy, constrained by rules built to prevent overreaction. Stability held, but at the cost of agility. The same features that smoothed cycles now slowed response. The buildup intensified as critics questioned whether boredom had gone too far. Growth lagged behind potential. New sectors found it harder to scale. Entrepreneurs complained that safety favored incumbents over challengers. The system worked, but only within familiar boundaries. Stability had become selective, protecting what existed more than what could merge. Defenders pushed back firmly. They argued that excitement was exactly the problem. That financial history proved excess always arrived disguised as innovation. That boring systems saved societies from their own optimism. Better slow growth than sudden collapse. Better dull progress than spectacular failure. By now, the debate was no longer technical. It was philosophical. Should systems exist to enable possibility or to prevent catastrophe? Could stability be both safe and dynamic? Or did safety require sacrifice of momentum? What was clear is that boredom was not accidental. It had been chosen, embedded, reinforced through incentives and culture. And once boredom becomes infrastructure, changing it requires more than reform. It requires rethinking what stability is for in the first place. The tension reached its peak when boredom itself became a risk. Systems built to avoid shock began accumulating it instead. Innovation moved outside regulated spaces. Complexity hid in corners no one monitored closely. Stability on the surface masked fragility beneath it. What was calm to observe became brittle under pressure. The conflict sharpened as unexpected crises exposed the limits of deliberate dullness. Procedures designed to slow decisions delayed response. Safeguards written to prevent excess constrained adaptation. By the time action arrived, damage had already spread. The system survived, but narrowly and at rising cost. Boredom had reduced volatility, but it had also reduced awareness. The buildup intensified when internal assessments surfaced. Analysts warned that excessive predictability encouraged complacency. Risk did not disappear. It migrated. When excitement was suppressed, it reemerged where oversight was weakest. Stability had created blind spots, and blind spots, once discovered, were exploited quickly. Public trust wavered. People sensed that safety was being maintained by inertia rather than resilience. Growth felt constrained. Opportunity narrowed. Younger generations questioned a system that promised protection but offered little momentum. Boredom, once reassuring, began to feel suffocating. Inside institutions, a quiet debate unfolded. Some argued that boredom must evolve, not vanish, that stability could remain unglamorous while still responsive. Others warned that loosening constraints would reopen the door the cycles Europe had worked decades to suppress. The fear of excitement lingered longer than the fear of stagnation. By this stage, the paradox was undeniable. Stability designed to be boring had succeeded too well. It had reduced drama, but also dulled signals. It had prevented collapse, but also delayed renewal. The system was safe, yet increasingly out of sync with a world that moved faster every year. The question was no longer whether boredom protected stability. It was whether stability could survive without learning how to adapt. The shift did not come through abandonment, but through refinement. Europe did not reject boring stability. It learned to distinguish between dullness that protects and dullness that obscures. The challenge was not to reintroduce excitement, but to reintroduce awareness. The climax unfolded when reforms targeted blind spots rather than fundamentals. Oversight expanded into previously ignored spaces. Feedback loops were shortened. Stress testing grew more realistic. Stability remained unglamorous, but became more alert. Boredom stopped meaning slowness everywhere. It meant restraint where risk accumulated fastest. The resolution followed gradually. Innovation was allowed within defined sandboxes. Growth was encouraged without spectacle. Systems learned to signal stress earlier, without amplifying panic. Stability regained its role as foundation rather than ceiling. Safety no longer required stagnation. What endured was a mature understanding. Stability is not the absence of motion. It is a capacity to absorb change without collapse. Boredom can be a feature, but only when paired with curiosity. When predictability blinds rather than protects, it becomes dangerous. Europe's experiment left behind a lesson still unfolding today. The most resilient systems are not those that eliminate surprise, but those that prepare for it quietly. They remain calm without becoming complacent, dull without becoming deaf. Stability was designed to be boring, but it was never meant to stop listening. Sometimes the smallest shift in perspective becomes the beginning of a new future. Why